Hi, everyone. On behalf of MinShape, MnDape, and MDE, we'd like to welcome you back to the 2024 to 25 school year. It's a great time to be a health teacher, a physical educator, or a DAPE teacher. I can envision all the students and their smiles and energy as they start a new school year. I want to thank you all for all the joy you bring into their lives and wish you the very best this year. I'm Mary Thyssen-Milder, and I'm the Physical Education Specialist at the Minnesota Department of Education. I'm so proud of the MDE, MnShape, and MnDape partnership. I've often said I cannot do my job without these organizations. Rich Burke serves as the DAPE consultant at MDE through the Low Incidence Project. He's a retired teacher from Mounds View and has continued his leadership beyond his retirement. He heads up the DAPE leadership team, one of the few active DAPE teacher connections across the country. Our relationship goes back a long way, and I value it. The next group to acknowledge is the MnShape executive team. Megan McCullum from the Robbinsdale School District serves as the executive director. Deb Van Clive from Stillwater Schools serves as president. Annika Culver from Medina Public Schools is president-elect, and Lisa Smith from Lakeville Schools serves as a secretary. I want to take this opportunity to remind you that these folks, as well as many others on the MnShape Board of Directors and the DAPE leadership team, are constantly working to push the profession forward. I would encourage everyone listening to this to become active with both MnShape and MnDape. If you don't want a leadership position, it can just be showing up for conferences and workshops to share your expertise and grow from the experiences of others. Our profession relies on the willingness of people to volunteer and show up. Okay, let's get down to business. The 2024 Minnesota legislative session made changes to state statutes that directly impacted K-12 public education. This is an overview of those changes involving health education, physical education, and developmental adaptive physical education. Let's look at health education first because it has had the most changes. Minnesota health education standards are shifting from being developed by the local school districts to statewide development. The development of these standards will start this school year. However, please note that your locally developed standards in health education will still apply until statewide rules implementing the to-be-developed statewide standards are completed and the final implementation timeline is identified by MDE. MDE is responsible for facilitating the health education standard development process, which is also called rulemaking. The same adoption process will be followed as all the other required academic standards content areas, including math, ELA, science, the arts, and physical education. The legislature identified the following content that must be included in the health education standards that already have Minnesota statutes associated with them. All of the subject areas have been in previous legislation and are local school district requirements. What this legislation does is require they all have to happen within the health education curriculum, which is a change. The legislation also identified the grade levels that specific topics should be included. The content areas are cardiopulmonary resuscitation and automatic external defibrillator education for grades 7 through 12, vaping awareness and prevention education for students in grades 6 through 8, cannabis use and substance use education for students grades 6 through 12, sexually transmitted infections and diseases education that meets the requirements in current statute, and mental health education for students in grades 4 through 12. I will also say that the subject areas identified are not limited to the identified grade levels. Decisions may be made to expand the grade levels. The legislation also identified other health-related subject areas that are currently in legislation, but are not legislated to specifically be provided in health education. These subjects may be included in the statewide standards. They include child sexual abuse prevention education, violence prevention, character development education, safe and supportive schools, and other expectations for learning identified through the standards development process. Let's talk about that last statement. Other expectations for learning identified through the standards development process. This is where some flexibility comes in. We all know that comprehensive health education is composed of subject areas beyond those listed in the legislation in the previous slides. The good news is that the legislation does not limit the inclusion of other areas. Other areas the committee may consider, but are not limited to emotional health, consumer health, environmental health, other substances use and abuse, nutrition, and physical activity. Comprehensive school health education is intended to address not only the physical, but also the social and emotional dimensions of health. It is designed to motivate and assist students in maintaining and improving their health, enabling students to develop the skills and attitudes necessary for health-related problem solving and informed decision-making. There was a change regarding credit for health education. Currently, local school districts assign health education credits sufficient to satisfy the locally developed standards. Once the statewide standards are developed, the amount of credits will still be determined at the local level, but it must be enough credits sufficient to satisfy the state standards in health education upon adoption. Every required content area is on a 10-year revision cycle in Minnesota. The legislative session added health education to the list. Since we're beginning to develop the health education standards in 2024 to 25, the next revision cycle will be 2034 to 35. This is the last legislative change for health. Now let's talk about when this revision process will be happening. The first thing that needs to happen is to hire someone to facilitate the health education standards development process. MDE posted an application for a health education specialist on August 30th, 2024. This position will serve as a state expert and primary resource for K-12 health education, providing direction and leadership, and strengthening the capacity of school districts in health education. The first responsibility will be facilitating the development, implementation, and support of the statewide academic standards in health education. The application process is still active at the time of this recording. The application period is scheduled to close on September 23rd, 2024. To see the application, go to the Minnesota Careers website and search for job ID 79742. You can also get more information about the position on the MnShape MDE announcement page or the MDE Health Education website. Once the application process closes, the interview process and the position announcement will occur as soon as possible thereafter. All Minnesota academic standards are written by a committee. MDE will post the application process to serve on the MDE Health Education Academic Standards Committee on the MDE Academic Standards webpage. At the time of this recording, MDE had not yet identified a date for the committee application process. If you're interested in serving on the committee, Check the MDE Academic Standards webpage often. During the application process, the committee applicants must agree to the posted MDE assumptions regarding the standard development. The assumptions are a list of statements that are accepted to be true in the standard development process for health. The assumptions will be posted at the same time as the committee applications. The legislation identifies that the Standards Committee represent diverse populations, including licensed health educators, higher education representatives, school administrators, parents of school-aged children, current students, representatives of the Minnesota business community, representatives from the Tribal Nations Education Committee, and tribal nations and communities in Minnesota, including both Anishinaabe and Dakota. The timeline for committee meetings and work was not determined at the time of this recording. Check the MDE academic website often in September. The work will include writing multiple drafts that will be released for public comment. The final draft will be submitted to the commissioner for approval and is submitted to the administrative law judge for review. A statement of need and reasonableness, or a SONAR, is developed and submitted. A SONAR refers to a document that outlines how the proposed standards are logical and appropriate, considering all relevant factors and demonstrating that the standards are not excessive or unreasonable. The final legislative rules and notice of intent to adopt the rules follow. The full implementation of the new standards by Minnesota schools will be released by MDE following the standard development process. That's the end of the health education legislative news, and it was a lot. I can't tell you how happy I am to have the legislation that allows MDE to develop statewide health education standards. We have been waiting a long time to create these standards and grade level expectations. I'm so looking forward to it. Now let's move on to physical education and DAPE. I promise you, there are fewer changes for them than health. Let's start with physical education. The physical education credit language was clarified in legislation. Like health education, physical education credit is determined at the local level. The current legislative language used the word credits. It was problematic in that credit is defined in multiple ways in school districts. For example, a school may have a 1-credit physical education requirement that lasts all year, and another may have a 2-trimester physical education requirement that says 2 credits. Taking away the S in credits allows it to be permissive so that credit can be either singular or plural. Whatever the district determines is sufficient to meet the state required physical education standards. Current legislation required MDE to adopt and adapt the SHAPE national standards for state required standards. This paragraph was eliminated for a very simple reason. Reviewing the national standards is one of the many steps that occur during the standard revision process in all standard areas, so it's unnecessary to have in legislation. The removed paragraph also included writing sample assessments that were to be met in 2019 and needed to be deleted. A special note here regarding the Minnesota physical education standards. SHAPE America released new national physical education standards in 2024. However, their release has no impact on Minnesota physical education. As we heard earlier, academic standards in Minnesota are on a 10-year revision cycle. The next revision cycle is in 2026 to 27. Until then, all Minnesota teachers are required to utilize the 2018 Minnesota K-12 academic standards in physical education. The new 2024 SHAPE America physical education standards will be reviewed in 2026 to 27 by the Physical Education Standards Revision Committee, and they will determine if all or any will become part of the Minnesota state standards. And here's some DAPE news. The Developmental Adapted Physical Education Standalone Assessment for Students with Disabilities was passed and put into law effective July 1, 2024. A school district may conduct an assessment for developmental adapted physical education as defined in Minnesota rules as a standalone evaluation without conducting a comprehensive evaluation of the student in accordance with prior written notice provisions in legislation. A parent or guardian may request that a school district conduct a comprehensive evaluation of the parent's or guardian's student. This law applies to students with disabilities, whereas DAPE evaluation may be conducted for a student with an individualized education program, or IEP, without requiring a comprehensive evaluation. This is not my area of expertise. If you have any questions related to this new law, please contact the MDE Special Education Division at mde.specialed@state.mn.us or contact the DAPE specialist, Rich Burke, at richbmindape@gmail.com. That concludes the 2024 Health and Physical Education Legislative Update. Now let's talk about some opportunities we have to gather, learn from each other, and network. There are always 2 conferences for health and physical education in the fall. MnDAPE is usually the last part of September, and MnShape is typically the first part of November. Both conferences are packed full of amazing presentations. They also provide special awards for Minnesota teachers and have exhibitors who can provide tremendous resources. I'd encourage you all to go online and register for these conferences at the MnDAPE and MnShape websites. Now for the hard part for me. It's time for me to move on to a new chapter in my life. I'll be retiring right after Thanksgiving. I'll still have the opportunity to see you this fall, and I look forward to that. I want to express my gratitude for the 29 years I've spent with MDE. Actually, I've spent 46 years in the HPE profession. I learned a lot from you and my colleagues at MDE. I will miss the standards work and the professional development, but most of all, I'll miss you. It's been my privilege to serve you. I expect to release one more video following the MnShape conference in November. The focus of that will be a review of our history and celebrating you. Thanks for listening.